Hello and welcome to yet another episode of Beyond the Blackboard. I am your host, I guess, Ran, ex-teacher / general learning enthusiast. And this week we're going to be talking about different learning styles. We're talking visual, we're talking auditory, we're talking kinesthetic. And not only are we going to be talking about it and discovering what you are, I'm also going to tell you how to use it and apply it so you can accelerate your learning, boost your grades, and build towards your future. How does that sound? Good, let's go. Alright, different learning styles. So we all may know in a vague way that we like to learn in certain ways better than others. Maybe some of us like listening to information, maybe some of us like seeing information, whatever it is, we have different styles that we might lean towards. And it turns out actually it's not just a vague concept. A load of research has been done in this area by top academic thinkers, working out how it is that you guys, students, best learn. Now it must be said before I get started, there is some dispute about some of the theories that I'm going to talk about. Some people think that learning styles are an oversimplification of the truth, and that may very well be true, but what I would say is that these are really useful tools, even though they're simplifications maybe, to help you discover your best ways of learning. So as I'm talking about this, bear in mind, take it with a pinch of salt, use them as basic outlines for helping you discover your learning journey. Alright, so there are lots of different models for different types of learning styles, but the one I'm going to focus on today is basically the most popular, and it is called the VARK model. And VARK stands for visual, auditory, reading and writing, and kinesthetic. And it kind of says what it is on the tin. Visual are people who use diagrams and more visual cues in order to learn. Auditory are people who hear better when they're listening or discussing something. Reading and writing are better with actual written statements. And kinesthetic, which is maybe the hardest to understand, kinesthetic are learning by doing. So let's say a science practical might suit them best for learning. Now these might still seem quite vague concepts and not very usable or applicable to you guys, so I'm going to run through a specific scenario that should help you guys understand a bit better. So let me paint you a picture or scenario with my imagination brush. You are sat down with your friends and you're about to play a game of cards. Doesn't really matter what game it is, and you have to learn what this game of cards is. You've never played it before, and you have to find out how you are going to learn that game of cards. Let's say Snap. Keep it easy. Now if you're a visual learner, what you'd want is a diagram of how the card game works, preferably laid out step by step and actual pictures of the game being played. A step further to that would be you actually drawing pictures would help even more. If you're an auditory learner, you'll just be able to ask your mates, they'll explain it to you, and maybe with a bit of discussion, you're going to understand how the game is played. If you're reading and writing, you're going to have to turn either what your friend is saying to you or the diagram that you're seeing into a specific sentence, or you might just read the written out instructions. And kinesthetic learners are likely going to have to play the game itself before they understand. Now why did I use a card game as an example? Well, this has been directly applicable to my life. I recently went on holiday and played loads of cards with my friends. I'm a massive either visual or kinesthetic learner. I have to either see a diagram or actually do something in order to understand it. And the reason I know this is because my friend spent about half an hour explaining to me how a card game was played called Whist, and it's literally like staring at a blank sheet, nothing goes in. He knows nothing goes in, he keeps trying, and I just stare off into space and think about something else. I just can't learn like that. In the same way, if he was going to give me a list of instructions, I'm not going to learn. However, when I start, if I were to make a mind map about the process of playing the game, or if I were to actually start playing the game, that is when I pick it up super quickly. But before we actually start playing, I can tell I'm the slowest person at picking up any board game. It's actually become a running joke in my friend group. Now I kind of knew this, but I wanted to take a test in order to confirm it. It says I'm mildly visual. I would say I'm highly visual probably. But what the outcome of my test was, and I'll put a link in the description below so you can do your test as well and work out what you are, is that I'm a mixture of visual and kinesthetic. I need to see or do in order to learn. Hearing, very little. And reading and writing, nearly non-existent. I mean, these are just, I've never been very good with letters or writing. Asked my old class, I made spelling mistakes on the board all the time. So what I potentially recommend doing is pausing the video there and doing the test in the link below that I've given. But if you want to do that later, I'm now going to move on to how you can actually use your knowledge of what learning style you are for your work at school so you can boost your grades. Alright, so if you're a visual learner, what I'd recommend for your revision or homework or study or whatever it is you want to do to make something learnt is use as many visual cues as you possibly can, and in fact, make those visual cues. It's not going to be enough to just look at information on the page. Don't get confused about that. You need to create things that are visual for you to learn. So honestly, the best thing I can recommend is a mind map. A mind map is the visual learner's best friend because you can see everything laid out nicely on one page with loads of different colors, with loads of different diagrams, with your highlighter out. You can see lots of different concepts connected in different ways, and it hits your brain in a way that is going to make it stick. Another example of that is bullet journaling and maybe even cue cards. Now, if you're an auditory learner, what I'd recommend, and you've got quite a few things at your disposal, is firstly, of course, listen to your teacher in class. You're lucky in that if your teacher is speaking at you, a lot of the information is going to be absorbed. I'm not one of those people at all. But if you're revising at home or doing your homework, a few resources you can use. Firstly, YouTube. Secondly, setting up a discussion with friends about a particular topic. Thirdly, recording specific bits of information so you can listen back to it later. I know some people who learn really well French or Spanish vocabulary or German vocabulary through literally recording what they're going to say, recording their vocabulary list, and then they'll just listen to it on the bus and it'll go in. And fourthly, making rhymes, raps, or mnemonics. So things like Richard of York gave battle in vain for the colours of the rainbow are going to be really useful for you. Again, especially if you've made those mnemonics or rhymes, they're going to work even better for you. Reading and writing, so I'm less familiar. I think there are less reading and writing people, to be honest. But if you do think you're one of these people, then what I'd recommend is turning all information into a clear statement. So if you have a diagram or a pie chart, describe that diagram or pie chart. If you've got a picture of a battle in history, describe what is going on in that battle. And also focus perhaps more on essays and bullet points as you're doing your revision. Again, this type of learner is a bit more ambiguous and a little bit less defined, and I think there are less of them. But yeah, there are a few tips there. And finally, kinesthetic learners or feeling learners. Now again, kinesthetic learners learn by doing, so a few things you can do. Let's say you have a science practical. Firstly, really engage in the science practical itself as you're doing it. But secondly, of course, you don't have another opportunity to do that science practical, probably. But what you can do is visualize it and replay it in your head. Instead of reading a list or seeing diagrams of the practical, you can imagine it and replay it in your head as if you're doing it, and that's going to really help your learning. Same thing with field trips, for instance. You're really going to benefit from them, so always try and go along to those. Another thing you can do is ask your teacher or friend, whoever's explaining something to you, to turn a concept from what we call an abstract concept to a concrete one. If I were to say something like an object has a terminal velocity, then that is an abstract concept. You don't really know exactly what that means. If I were to turn that into a concrete concept, I would say if I drop a bowling ball, it's going to accelerate to a certain point and then reach its terminal velocity where its speed will stay constant. Now, as a kinesthetic learner, you can now understand the concept of the bowling ball being dropped, and there's an actual scenario, a concrete scenario you can understand. So always ask, if you don't understand a vague something that someone says, ask for a specific example of how that works in reality. And one more tip for kinesthetic learners, again I've got a few because I am one. Sometimes accept that if someone explains something to you auditory, you're not going to understand fully until you actually do something. This is something that, for instance, I've done with card games, but also I do at work all the time. I work as a management consultant, and I have many different projects where people explain things to me, and I know for a fact that I'm not going to understand fully until firstly I ask them to make it concrete, or secondly actually start doing something or making diagrams and things like that after we finish that conversation. It doesn't make you a slow learner, it just means you learn in a different way. Alright guys, I do hope that video has been useful. I've really enjoyed making this one. If you'd like to take that test, I put it in the link below to find out what learner you are. If you've got any more follow-up questions on this, please do let me know. I answer to every single comment in the comment section below, and also let me know any future videos you'd like me to make. That would be helpful for you. Until next time, see you later.